Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our global viewers. I'm Catherine Cloninger, Director of Clinical Research Marketing at Parexel, and delighted to welcome all of you to our first webinar in our Workforce of the Future series. Today, we're talking about CRAs, and we'll touch on recruitment, professional development, and retention strategies. Both speakers have dedicated their careers to clinical research. Jennifer Scheller joins us from Merck, where she's the North American Head of Clinical Operations. Lisa Feeley is the Vice President of Clinical Operations at Parexel FSP. Today's discussion is intended to be informal. There are no slides, and we have plenty of time for questions. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask away. There's a lot to talk about, so I'll hand the mic over to Lisa Feeley to get the conversation started.
Thank you, Kat. So clinical research has transformed over the last 10 years, and so has the talent needed to support successful clinical trials. The demands of a typical CRA have rapidly evolved, but job competencies haven't kept pace with the converging trend of more data, digital technologies, complex procedures, novel therapies, recruitment and retention, certainly for more niche populations, and new methodologies for study conduct. So responsibilities that once focused on paper-based tasks like documentation compliance, drug accountability, source data verification, now focus more on data analytics across many data sources, risk management, and the management of more complex trials. Jen and I, certainly both of us, recall the SDV and everything being done in 3-part NCR for case report forms. So certainly things have come a long way. There's a shortage of skills and critical thinking needed for trials of today and tomorrow, and that's been intensified by a gap in talent development. So experienced CRAs are retiring or changing roles, progressing in their career. And so it's leaving an experience gap for sponsors and CROs to try and fill. As roles change, competency requirements also change, and this has a significant impact on productivity, job satisfaction, performance, and certainly retention. So today, Jen and I will be discussing the evolving CRA role, how it's changed, and how we can address the need for new skills with training and talent development to fix the gaps while we prepare today's workforce for the skills we envision needing in the future. So Jen, let me first ask, in your experience, how has the role of the CRA changed over the last several years?
Hi, Lisa. It's great to be with you today. I look forward to this discussion. And, as you highlight, gone are the days of the 3-part NCR paper CRFs. I remember being very proud when we could fill a truck full of paper that was on its way down to the FDA for a filing. And certainly technology has taken over in much that we do and doesn't always simplify things. So to your point, with the evolution of clinical trial design and operational strategies, this has a significant impact on the role of the CRA, and it continues to evolve as trials become more complex, with increase of technology and as well as a lot of more data collection. When you look at trials today, they have several vendors, maybe 9 or 10 vendors per trial on average. This is much different than what we've had, in years past. And CRAs are managing not just one trial or one therapeutic area, although we do try to keep some CRAs more focused on oncology. CRAs are managing multiple trials. So that's, 10 vendors per trial, multiple trials. That's a lot to become familiar with and maintain. And then this is coupled with the CRAs really are frontline with our clinical research sites, who also, are often part of large institutions and use many different systems across the board, even within a country. You look at source documents Not all sites use EMR today, and those that do, there's many different types of EMRs to navigate and become familiar with. And this has become even more attuned as we're, in the world of remote monitoring and in the COVID environment. So there's a lot of variety within studies, at the sponsor level and CRO, but also, within our sites, even within a single site, but also across sites within different areas. So it's a lot for CRAs to really digest and interpret and then apply, GCP and trial compliance principles as they navigate these complexities. The role has also evolved. Fortunately, we have more focus on risk-based approaches, which is great, really trying to focus more on critical data and what's important. This also comes with additional tools and roles across clinical trial teams to help identify signal detection, and you have to really kind of weigh that with what's noise versus true detection, and really become comfortable with a focus on critical data versus, what we did historically is looking at everything 100%, from A to Z. So I think, as you highlighted earlier, the CRA role and the skill to be able to interpret data, leverage many different types of technology systems, and really work with more analytics in monitoring activities and not just the head down approach of comparing documents. This is really, I would say, a major part of the evolution of CRAs. And when they're managing sites, they need to be looking at trends and, are you seeing minor deviations trend where you need to have, a stronger action plan with a site? And, we're, in the realm of using things like scorecards so we can share with sites, how their performance is on a given trial, so we have more data-driven discussions. But for the CRA, this means they really have to pivot. They have to go from the big picture down into the weeds to do some of the more detailed checks. So it's quite different from, when you and I started, and continues to evolve with these complexities.
Thanks, Jen. I think back to a few things that you said. I remember working in regulatory and loading those big trucks going down to the FDA. So certainly things have changed since that time. So certainly data analytics, right? I mean, and what these CRAs have access to these days for data is certainly really helpful, and something I think we all wish that we had years ago. But it's helpful. It's helpful for them in guiding their sites and knowing where to put their focus. So Jen, how can we as an industry develop and continually reinforce these new skills that are needed? Like, what efforts are currently in place, and then how do we address the gaps?
Yeah, and when you look at clinical trials, it's an exciting time today, and they continue to rise. There's more and more trials, but we haven't kept up with the resources and talent development. So for me, the crux of the focus needs to start, collectively as an industry, to do a better job and more dedicated job in growing our workforce. We have to grow our workforce to keep up with the demands, and then also to build in the training, for these skills and data analytic components as we highlighted. And now's the opportune time. With COVID, clinical trials are in the public spotlight. People know what they are. They're excited about them. They're excited even to participate them. And it's in the dialogue. So I think now more than ever is a great time for all of us across the industry to tap into this public curiosity. And there's lots that we can do individually and collectively to get out there and raise awareness, not only about clinical trials, but about the career paths in clinical trials. Talking to students, they don't even realize this is an option. There's so many traditional trajectories that this one is missed, and this is a fantastic career, as we can attest to, doing clinical operations for over 20 years and still loving it. And when you look at the talent gap, it's not just limited to CRAs, of course. It also affects other key functions running clinical trials, like our study managers and clinical scientists and other roles. But I think, we do need to remember that the CRA role is really often a feeder pool, right, for other clinical roles. When you look at some of our senior leadership including at Merck, they started as a CRA, which is pretty inspiring, I think, to CRAs and those coming into the field out there. It really gives a core foundation and an understanding of our most precious collaboration, which is that with our sites. Our CRAs, I think, understand best the challenges and nuances that our sites face. So, when we're looking at addressing the gaps, I think we really need to look at growing the workforce and walking the talk and, not always mandating a senior person for our roles, and also looking at the ways we recruit and looking to diversify the sources of resources that we tap into. There's lots of efforts underway at both of our organizations with diversity and inclusion, and that the time to do that is also with not only developing our talent, but recruiting new talent and looking at different sources where we can get more diverse workforce. At Merck, I can say that we have expanded our intern program. So we are hiring college grads who don't have any experience, in clinical research other than coming in for an internship. And even we're going beyond that because it's working so well. In the US, internships are very short, typically 3 months, doesn't give you a whole lot. So we've adapted actually our job description. And Lisa, you know this well too, because we apply it to our partners. And in that we do allow talent to come in that doesn't have direct experience. We have to get out of that catch-22 of you must have, 1 to 2 years of industry experience and really build it, with robust onboarding, hands-on experience, mentorship. We have such incredible experienced, seasoned talent out there who are often very willing to be mentors, and it's a great marriage, of the two needs. I also just want to highlight, we are a part of the ACRP Partnership and Workforce Advancement, which is also committed to growing, diversifying, and standardizing some of the workforce competencies. And we have built this into our entry-level training with the professional certification and training, and really getting those simulation modules so they can have hands-on experience coupled with the mentorship and getting out there and really doing the work.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I could not agree with you more. I mean, a lot of us, and it's helpful to many of us that senior leadership, as you mentioned, have experience being CRAs because it is a complex position with a lot of responsibility. And the fact that they understand that and have lived that, I think certainly helps all of us. Yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly on what you said about building the workforce, right? We all have an obligation in industry to assist in this. So how at Merck do you successfully recruit CRAs?
Yeah, and we follow the traditional methods that probably a lot of organizations do. I think referrals are the best, right? A CRA referring or somebody referring a CRA is one of the greatest attestments of quality, because people aren't going to put themselves out there without, referring someone who's really strong. We also use ACRP. They have a great career center. And, we've been working on our university partnerships and making sure we're getting out there. We have our first career fair next week, and we're going to be doing some road shows just to share a day in the life of different roles like the CRA, medical writer, study manager, and engaging alumni, and really working to ensure we have a diverse geography and footprint. I think, the beauty of our clinical research roles, including the CRA, is that they're remote. So we can go anywhere in the country, which allows us to really better diversify. And the one thing I wanted to mention as well, when I share that we should all ensure that we have entry-level positions, but we also should think of ourselves in this profession as community ambassadors, getting out there and sharing, within our communities, what is clinical research. And one thing that we're doing at Merck, and, we did some of this work with ExecuPharm, Lisa, is really getting out to students and sharing what is clinical research and what is a CRA. So that even high school students or college students, as they're thinking about their journeys, just to know that this is out there, and it's a very rewarding profession in and of itself. I think many of us stumbled upon it by accident, taking some traditional trajectories in the pre-med and different scientific or clinical routes, but to get out there and share that this exists, I think just goes a tremendous way. And we've reached, in our first 2 years or so, we've reached over 1,000 students across the U.S. with just our Merck team using their volunteer hours to share this. And some of the impacts have been quite remarkable. And in talking to the college students, they're saying, I'm going to change my major. This is really exciting. I want to really get myself prepared to be able to, become a CRA one day, and potentially, the other aspects of clinical research. So, really getting out there and sharing with schools. You'd be surprised at how interested even STEM programs in high schools and advanced biology. I've been out there myself, and it's rewarding. And this is grassroots what we're doing, but if we all collectively invested some efforts there, it's really minimal investment to help educate and raise awareness, and that will bring us a longer term strategy or investment of potential candidates down the line.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I feel, I look back to when I decided to get into clinical research, and I was in college and decided that that's the career path I wanted to take. And someone took a chance on me, right? I had no clinical research experience, clearly. So the fact that somebody took a chance on me and brought me in, I'm forever thankful. And we're finding that in the people that we're bringing in that have no clinical research experience. They're eager, they're hungry, they're invested, and that's valuable. That's the type of people we want, right? That we want to bring into this. I actually have 3 sons in college, and one of their universities I'm already speaking with. I'm going to go to the university and speak with their college students about careers and job opportunities in clinical research. Heck, I should go to all 3 of their universities. I'll do a country tour. So it's exciting, and that's one avenue, right, to build the workforce. Another avenue we're finding, and we've found in the past, is bringing people in that are within pharma, but they want to expand their horizons and get into clinical. And we found a lot of people in the labs in the past. They develop a compound and then they want to see what happens after that. So sort of, their interest and curiosity gets the best of them, and they want to know, where it's going to go from there. So I'm passionate about this field as a profession. I've spent my entire professional career here, as I believe you have as well. So I hope that others that we bring in feel the same way. So Jen, what drove Merck to rethink talent development and training?
Yeah, and as you know, over the course of the last few years, Merck has moved to an in-source model with FSP, and have sort of grown the operational workforce. And as we've evolved, we invested heavily in an internship program, and as that was kicked off, with Merck Research Laboratories, there was over 400 interns. As an example, a few years ago, we had a very interested early talent in clinical research, but we didn't have a position for them because we had that catch-22 of you must have, 1 or 2 years of specific experience. So we thought, well, this is really kind of a waste. So we changed our job description and built a program, an early talent program. It's led by Michelle Mitri. That really has specific training courses, but also those hands-on experiences, and they built a comprehensive list of experiences that this early talent needs to get their hands on. And then they're super quick to contribute, as you know, Lisa. I mean, as you said, somebody took a chance on you, and when you do that and people are hungry, it's just the rewards are tremendous. And like I said earlier, we have the seasoned workforce who are actually very interested in mentoring and training. So it's just such a great combination together. So we continue to grow it. We started with our interns. We did an intern to hire program. We're now expanding beyond interns and going out more to universities. And to your point, also recruiting study coordinators or others who want to join the industry. And, we've certainly seen the scientists transition from the lab as well. And that can be a great success too.
Thanks, Jen. What about, has this training investment impacted retention?
Yeah, I mean, it's early because we've been doing this just a few years. So far, everybody's with us, and we do have great retention overall. We do invest a lot in, Merck has tremendous support, but also we invest a lot in our talent. And, our first cohort intern to hire from 2018. I think they started in 2019, but were recruited in 2018. They've moved on to graduate, to their next roles within clinical research, and they've taken different pathways, which I think is important that we're all flexible to support that as well. Especially when you have long tenures, in this profession, it's nice to sort of spider web and get different experiences across. But so far, everybody's with us, and I think, as you mentioned earlier, it's just when you invest in someone, you get that much back, and people, become quite loyal to the mission and the model because they see how much you value them as people. People are what it's all about.
Exactly, Jen. That's what we're finding as well, that they really appreciate that we took a chance on them, right? It's such as I appreciate that somebody took a chance on me. Then I stayed with that organization for 18 years. So there is that loyalty. So what other significant considerations are there for retention? I know, the CRA, specifically the CRA role, is a very intense role. So possibly to either offset stress or burnout.
Yeah, and I remember, the earlier days when we weren't regionalized, leaving from Philadelphia to somewhere in the Midwest and waking up just thinking, where am I today? What time zone am I on? It was, 4 days a week and then getting back to do your trip reports. And, fortunately, the industry has shifted to a better model. Less travel, I think, is important to have that balance, especially so, our CRAs can be home with their families and finding that good balance. So the regionalization, has been a key. The other is, some people are joining clinical research because they have a passion. Maybe they've had an experience, or they themselves have been a patient and they want to really contribute to oncology research or pediatrics. So certainly we can meet the needs of those passions, right? And couple CRAs with assignments in those therapeutic areas. I also think we need to really recognize CRAs. They are our front lines. They are one of the most critical roles in clinical research, and that really needs to be recognized. And, we have different programs, as you do, for recognition, whether it's a thank you and a note, or, a gift card and some sort of point system or what have you. But I think it's important that we take the time to really recognize the contributions of CRAs and really making others aware in clinical research what a CRA does. I think one thing that we've found of high value is taking different leaders out with the CRA to see what it's like, to have to navigate a site and work with a site and have all that external management and matrix to really get what we need for, our clinical trial. It's a lot, and it's very eye-opening when you get some guests to join you out there. The other piece we hear a lot from our CRAs as we're evolving operations and developing new processes, make sure you include the CRA in that, because they can really give you some of the best insights on how it's going to work day to day and with our sites in particular too. And we're always looking at, what the role of the CRA, it's quite varied across, companies as far as, what CRAs are doing today. But there's always opportunity, I think, to make sure that we're taking as much as we can administratively off their workload so they can spend time, managing their sites and managing important GCP issues. I think of things like training records and, making sure systems are updated. That's something that we continuously work on to try to improve for our CRAs so they don't, lose hours to those types of things.
Yeah, I think that's a smart move. CRAs who monitor want to monitor. So yeah, that's what we continually hear. So I think, that's very smart. So beyond the initial training, what does an effective mentorship program look like?
Yeah, I think when you have a mentorship program, make sure you're giving those mentors time to do it. I think the worst you can have is somebody coming in and feeling like they're bothering their mentor because they're just so overwhelmed. So I think that's one of the first and most important points. I still remember my first mentors coming in, and I remember always asking questions and thinking, oh my gosh, they're gonna kill me. I keep asking, I keep bothering them. But patience and availability is such an important thing for mentors. So you have to free them up a little for their workload so that they can do it. The other component too, I think, is, I learned a lot early on with co-monitoring and getting out there with actually my manager when I was first working as a CRA many years ago. And I think that's a great way to learn from a seasoned CRA, right? And also do the work directly. We also have a lot of subject matter expert roles, in different topics. And our goal is that they are available for questions. So making sure, our entry-level folks too know who they are, so they can tap into and ask questions. You got to ask a lot of questions when you're coming in. It's a lot of work. But if you have the right experts out there and seasoned, talent, it works beautifully. The entry-level staff that we have coming in, or career changes or what have you, while they're learning this and developing their CRA expertise, it's also important, to invite them into other projects that are helping supporting operations more broadly and improving clinical research. We've had some great experience in bringing in talent, to drive things that are unrelated to the CRA work, but very operational and sort of helping them see the bigger picture of how the clinical trial engine is working. And it's great to have them a part of it because they have, fresh perspective, new ideas, and not sitting maybe in a headquarters seat where they're not so, exposed to the day-to-day of what our customers are facing, and our customers are our sites and our patients.
Thanks, Jen. I do recall my mentor very well, and it made a huge difference in my career and my position as a CRA to have somebody who was passionate and wanted to teach and took all of my million questions, right? But was always there for me without passing judgment on my questions. And I still remember that person very fondly today. So as you stated, right, they had a huge impact on our CRA position, but then also on our career. I kept in touch with that person for years. So certainly very influential, but I feel it has to be somebody who wants to do that, right? And has the time to do that, exactly as you stated. I feel that's important to set both parties up for success. Yeah.
That's right.
So Jen, what do you expect the CRA job expectations to look like, say, in the next 3 to 5 years from now? And also, what impact has COVID had on that?
Yeah, and when I think of the role of the CRA, what won't change is CRAs will continue to need to be relationship builders, with our sites. There are front lines, and I think the first CRAs out there was the sales force, right? And having been trained in that relationship building and negotiation, and that's not going to go away and will become ever more important, especially as we're working virtually, like in the COVID, environment. In talking with sites, I think we're going to continue on with a lot of remote source work and other activities coupled with that on-site time. So, we have to support our CRAs in having those virtual conversations, but also teaching some of the soft skills and, even recognizing the sites for our work, just being there to support them and communicating that, and not always just reaching out when, something is needed, because, those relationships really build the trust. Sites want to trust CRAs who have the expertise. So we have to make sure our CRAs are, constantly refreshed with ICH GCP. Even if you go through training and get a graduate degree, it's always good to refresh, on GCP principles and real world application. I think all of us, should continue to refresh that and invest in our CRAs to do so. And, the role is vast of the CRA, as we said earlier, navigating so many different different technologies and systems, and that will continue to be on the rise. Maybe we'll see more, direct data feeds, and the risk-based approach and focus and site management is going to be probably a greater focus, and also we should consider clinical trial awareness, especially in the US as an example, but in many countries, there still are gaps. So, could our CRAs be ambassadors in the community to also share a bit more, because access to trials still remains a challenge, for many patients out there. So we maybe need to think about opportunities at having very localized clinical research experts, in that capacity.
Excellent. Thanks, Jen. So this has been a great discussion. I want to thank you for joining me today. This has really been enlightening. And as I said earlier, Jen, I think you and I have been twins in sort of our careers in industry. And I hope that more people will follow in our footsteps, really, the people that are eager and excited about the work and clinical research in general, and developing new therapies and options for the patients. That to me is still, it motivates all of us to this day. So what's your parting advice to the industry based on your years of observation and lessons learned? And what do we need to do differently as an industry?
Yeah, and I sort of repeat myself on this topic, but we can't forget where we started. As you recall, your mentor, I do as well, and I had no idea what clinical research was. I did a bachelor's in molecular biology, a master's in public health epidemiology, and I got a random phone call from one of my classmates who I actually worked with recently. It's a very small world, but I remember when somebody hired me, they took a chance on me. I didn't have any experience. I had so many questions. We all need to do that. It's the only way we're going to grow. And I would say, for companies, CROs, and sponsors, it's important, if you have operational teams, to make sure that you have an entry-level role. It falls into that catch-22, as we talked about earlier. You have to have a role where you don't mandate X number of years of experience, so that you can truly grow and build the workforce. And without this, we're just going to end up in a talent war, and we're not going to be focused on the right things like talent development. So take a chance on someone is my advice, and we all need to take part in it.
I wholeheartedly agree, Jen. And we have a Parexel CRA training academy where we're doing just that. And we're pulling in people and recruiting people, again, finding the right people that want to do this for the right reasons, and pulling them in and putting them through some very, very good training. We have simulations where they're walking into the pharmacy. I mean, it's very, it's in all being done remote based these days, obviously, but very thorough and comprehensive training to set them up for success in the future. So thanks again, Jen. At this time, I'll hand it back over to Kat for the Q&A.
So thank you, Lisa and Jen, for just such a really insightful discussion. And I think both of you have such a natural passion for what you do and within clinical research. I mean, it's easy to see that both of you made excellent CRAs and how you've progressed your careers to where you are today. So we do have a number of questions, and it would be interesting to hear both of your perspectives for the first one, but I'll ask Jennifer to start. So how do you assess candidates beyond general life science education and the basic requirements? I mean, what kind of qualities are important?
Yeah, and CVs are interesting. I like to look for sort of those above and beyond nuggets that are in the CD. Not just I did a CRA job at this company for 2 years, but I look for even in university experience, if they participated in different clubs or volunteers, just kind of looking at passion and roundedness. When people job hop really quickly, that is kind of a question. If I see that somebody has some resiliency and can stick it out at a company for a few years at least, and is not just looking to keep, moving up in titles, but can demonstrate progress, I think those are key components for me. I don't know, Lisa.
somebody asked this, do you balance your checkbook, right? So I know that's a little bit odd, but attention to detail, right? I think, and looking at data and putting the big picture together from a bunch of little pieces. I think those are things we try and assess. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult, but really looking at the data, many different pieces of data, and putting the story together. And that's not necessarily inherent in everyone.
So for our next question, I think I'll start with Lisa this time. So this question states, when training CRAs new to the profession, how quickly can they be fully utilized? And how do you ensure quality?
Much quicker than one would envision. Mm-hmm. So we actually have done the metrics and pulled data on this, which I recently reviewed. So with regard to utilization and how quickly they can be fully utilized, it can be as early as 3 or as late as 6 months. That's still very quick. So we've looked at the data with regard to how quickly, certainly they do co-monitoring visits, they go through the training, and then when they're released out on their own to do their own visit, they do co-monitoring visits for all of the different visit types, and then when they're released to be ready to do their own visit, it can be as early as 3 months or up to 6 months, but that is still very quick for being fully utilized. With regard to quality, again, same exact thing. We looked at our experienced CRAs, and then we looked at the CRAs that were new and had gone through recent training and were new to industry. And again, the quality metric data was astounding, that their quality was on par with CRAs, experienced CRAs within 3 to 6 months. And we looked at that in a number of different ways. One is, action items and follow-up, trip report timeliness, a number of different metrics.
And how would you answer that question, Lisa? Or Lisa, Jen?
Yeah, and I agree with Lisa's points wholeheartedly. And it's not number of years of experience that will really tell you indicatively of quality always, despite what one thinks. And when you look at turnover, time it takes to replace someone, right, and recruit, I mean, that 3 to 6 months is really nothing. But no, I agree with Lisa's assessment there. And I know organizations look at this routinely to see what the difference is. And it seems to be quite a surprise that it's not what we think, right?
Yeah, agreed. One thing, if I could add, Kat, onto that is once you get that new person, that new trained resource, and training specific on, different clients, SOPs, systems, processes, right? How to be a CRA within that organization. Then it's about retaining them, right? So having a development plan for them and career path that's transparent to them, so they know what the options are and what the opportunities are.
So our next question focuses on development. So both of you might be able to answer this, but I'll start with Lisa here. What development pathways are there for CRAs, and what changes have you noticed in your career?
Wow. I look back to when I was a CRA, going back just a couple of years, and there were limited opportunities at that point coming out of the CRA position if you wanted to advance. There was basically, I think at the time it was pretty much study management and that took years to even get that as an option. Now there are so many different avenues that these folks can go into. They can be trial managers, in country. They can be global study managers. They can move into data management. They can move into contracts and budgets. They can move into regulatory. There's just, and I know I'm probably missing quite a few others, but there really are unlimited opportunities. They can move into supply chain. Mm-hmm. Jen, what am I missing? I know there's more.
Yeah, I think of my own path. So I was a CRA, and then I became a clinical scientist, and then moved into in-country manager, as you said, Lisa, and then global study manager. And, there's medical writing. People love to have the CRA foundational experience. to do additional tasks or roles in clinical research. But I think the sky's the limit in some cases, right? It's there's just vast opportunities, and some people want to stay a CRA for their career path, and that's great too.
And here's a follow-up question that we just received. Are you seeing interest from student pharmacists as competition for industry fellowships intensifies?
Competition, can you repeat it? I'm sorry.
Are you seeing any growing interest from student pharmacists?
We do. Yeah, we do have a fellowship program too, and probably you guys do as well at Parexel. And I know we're doing some road shows too. One just occurred the other day at a pharmacy school. But there's lots of opportunity and growth, and I think companies are probably looking to do more, in apprenticeships, fellowships, and what have you.
Yeah, Kat, and actually at the university, one of my son's universities where I've been speaking with them, one of the schools they want me to speak at is to the pharmacy students.
So our next question takes a slightly different turn, going back to sometimes the challenge of using lesser experienced CRAs. What kind of support do you provide them if performance isn't quite at the expectation level for CRAs?
Yeah, and maybe Lisa, I'll start. I mean, the manager plays a key role. And Lisa and I were talking about this the other day. You really need to make sure your managers have enough time and maybe a different algorithm, right, of number of CRAs that are not experienced. And those oversight visits and checks are really important. I think also the co-monitoring component is really helpful. And then checking in with stakeholders, but, coaching and development, retraining, maybe some of that simulation training on topics that they're challenged on, can become really important. But it's really important to hone in on, where it is that the deficits are and what type of training would make sense for that.
I agree. And having technology support in training we find is very big. Sometimes the technology can be the most challenging part, right? They can do they have the knowledge and the skills, but the technology is slipping them up some. Yeah. And also the mentor, as Jen and I had spoken of before, and having SMEs available to support them, and a buddy. We buddy them up with someone who is in the role and has experience in the role. And sometimes just having another voice and another person to bounce ideas or thoughts or questions off of is important. Definitely the support. And as Jen has stated, the manager having the proper work allocation to be able to really add some support to those entry level folks.
So I've got two, it looks like related questions to this. So I think this is a popular topic. So one is, are your CRAs in training working on sponsor contracts during their training period? Or is there co-monitoring on sites assigned to sponsor designated CRAs? And Lisa, that might be a better question for you.
So yes, they are working on sponsor trials. However, it is with agreement on the sponsor. And I can speak with Jen about this as an example. We're currently doing this with Merck. So our CRAs have gone through the training, our Parexel CRA Training Academy, and then they go through not how to be a CRA, but how to be a CRA at Merck, right? So it's really learning the Merck systems, SOPs, processes, and then begin working on that program. Again, we have a much lower manager allocation for those CRAs, and we have mentors and buddies set up for them, and then the understanding that they will have co-monitoring, higher oversight during that first 6 months, absolutely, and longer if need be.
Yeah, and I think what you had highlighted earlier, sharing the data on their performance, is really important to share with sponsors because it gives that reassurance as well.
Agreed, full transparency. Mm-hmm.
So So Lisa, I believe you've partially answered the next question, which is how do you ensure the right mix of experience for pairing less experienced CRAs with seasoned CRAs? Is there an algorithm?
Not necessarily. No, we don't have an algorithm. Jen, do you have anything for you to add on that?
No, and I think what you highlighted earlier, you have to make sure it's the right seasoned CRA, who's interested to mentor and open, because there would be nothing worse than, a junior CRA really trying to learn and someone feeling they're just too busy. So you have to give them the breadth of workload, but also they have to be interested. And there's so many that are interested, but it's certainly not for everyone. So that to me is the more important, like qualitative pairing for the two.
Right. You don't want to force somebody to do this who's not interested, right? That's not, but there are, as Jen stated, there's a lot of interested parties out there that really want to do this and they're passionate about it and teaching others.
It looks like I've got another one that just came in. As we move into RBM and use technology to identify trends and outliers and more remote capabilities, the need for CRAs to go to sites is decreasing. Do you see the CRAs moving into remote hubs to provide remote monitoring?
I mean, definitely with COVID, there's so much remote monitoring happening, and some countries allow it more than others. Some have more strict regulations, and I think that still needs to be worked on. I think especially in Europe, but we've done a tremendous amount of remote monitoring. But there's checks that you have to do to get out there. I mean, I hear people piloting Google Glasses and other ways to see things, but I also come back to. Certainly there'll be maybe fewer on-site visits, but I do believe there is high value. And I know some companies, send staff out just for the relationship component. And yes, we can get good at that in virtual, but we all know it's not the same. But checking drug and pharmacy, some sites have been creative, right, in having virtual ways to do it. We're not 100%. I think we're years to go before that happens. But I think that relationship piece and the evolution of the CRA role will certainly continue. And as I mentioned before, I think even, the role of getting out there and supporting community awareness and trial awareness, that's a tremendous gap that, Zoom calls are not going to address, right? So there's still a lot of work. And I think to your question, this role will continue to evolve, with that, but it's going to take time.
And we've just had another one come in, and I'll ask which one of you might be best positioned to answer this. How do you see experienced drug safety professionals in clinical research, especially foreign trained, experienced graduates?
Very valuable.
Totally agree.
Yeah. And if there's specific questions or interests, I think you'll share our contact information after. Happy to, discuss, but extremely valuable.
Okay. And it looks like we've got a final question for Jen here. Can you comment on efforts within your company to expand diversity and inclusion in hiring?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot underway. I'll touch on a few. I mean, for one, for each open position, at least in our global trial operations group, we are committed to making sure we have diverse candidates, a pool of diverse candidates. So taking that extra effort and maybe going some non-traditional routes in sources of candidates. And then we're also committed to having diverse interviewers. So not just, so we don't have those, unconscious bias where you're picking the same type of person over and over because maybe that's what you're familiar with, but making sure we have diversity, in those who are interviewing candidates. This coupled with, we're really, as I mentioned, getting out there and doing some road shows. We're doing our first career fair next week, and we're going to target, different areas, HBCUs, for example, and other organizations where we can share, even with alumni, just more about, potential career opportunities. So we have lots underway, but those I would say are just some of the direct elements in recruiting talent.
That's great. Well, it looks like we're at the end of our questions now, so that concludes today's webinar. I hope everyone found today's discussion educational, and if you have additional questions, the last thing that you'll see on the screen is an email if you want to get in touch. But you've been such a great audience with a number of great questions, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.